I'm a libertarian. What I'm getting is,
did you vote for Judge Jorgensen or Trump?
Who?
Joe Jorgensen. That was the perfect answer. Thank you.
And welcome everybody to the Libertarian Podcast Review Podcast. We are here to review your liberty-leaning podcasts, critique them unnecessarily, and maybe help you find that autistic star you just didn't know you needed to hear from. We'll compile and give you a heads up of the up-and-comers, the entertainers, the influencers in this movement, your hub for all things libertarian podcast related. Maybe I should just say Liberty Podcast Review. And maybe we'll talk about changing the title here a little bit. Today, we're going to review Liberty Lockdown. It's a podcast I've recently come acquainted with. It's pretty good. My name is Tyler Yonke. If you want to hear a little bit about me, why I'm even qualified, if I am, well, check out episode number 1. It's kind of the origin story for myself and how I came into this. And maybe it's a little bit of something that you might be find useful yourself. And today we're going to go over, like I said, Liberty Lockdown. It is a gentleman, I believe he's in California. His name is Clint. That's all I could really get out of him. Maybe we'll try to have him on. I'm going to try to do podcast reviews of certain podcasts and then bring on the host if I can. Give him a little something. Oh, look, who am I? I'm an attorney. I live in California. I'm not anonymous. My name is Tyler Yonke. You can check me out in the probably description feed there. I also have a cycling podcast. I've covered the world of cycling for many, many years. Basically done a show a week. And like I said, check out episode 1 for more of that. I have a degree in mechanical engineering. I have a lot of degree. I do use that because I have my own firm and I'm in Northern California. Okay, today, feature podcast is called Liberty Lockdown. And like I mentioned in my origin story, a little bit about what we're going to do with this show, I talked about Clint, the gentleman that Liberty Lockdown, and that I had some run-ins with him on Twitter, and good ones for that matter. And with that, a little bit of that he had the show, he said it was going to be the most influential of like converting people. So I thought I'd give it a shot, see what it's all about. And if it's truly, as he says, as a dynamic and important as he says it is, I think maybe we'll take a look at his actual webpage here. Liberty Lockdown podcast featured by Prod Burner. It's a dude with a big muscle and a wife beater and a hat. Maybe that's supposed to be Clint with some guns here. Podcast. He's got 47 episodes in the book. And what we're going to do, we're going to do a little behind the scenes. We're going to talk about the podcast, who the hosts are, and some things we can devolve from there. He's got a lot of different episodes. I thought I'd play some clips too of one of his shows here and kind of give you an understanding of what he's got to have for the show. And also a little bit of overview. Seems to be somewhat anonymous. Like I said, he's not someone that we can find out his last name. At least he hasn't been given it. He's Liberty Thought Pod, Lockdown Thought Pod. Or I think I'll get his actual Twitter name here. I think he's in SoCal. It claims to be your home for righteous indignation. Episode 1 indicates he is just Clint, and he's worried about the feds. Clint also refers to a former podcast that possibly was run into the ground for undescribed reasons. So perhaps he's a guy that's had a show out there for quite some time. His podcast started in 2020. It appears to start out a desire to be a kind of a release valve on this anti-lockdown trend we have sweeping the world, and especially here in California. Clint also mentioned he is into volleyball. To me, this is gives him some little bit more cred. Why? Because I'm also into volleyball. I played high school, college, coached high school for boys and girls recently. It's not an easy sport, by the way. If you ever think and go to like some potluck or church outing or just to get together at the park, it's pretty nasty volleyball typically. And to have organized volleyball, first of all, it's really good when it's organized and it's done well, people with skills. Otherwise, it might be one of the worst sports in the world to try to play with people that don't know what they're doing. Can be mediocre volleyball can be quite pathetic. Okay, so his interview style. And what are his opinions? Well, it looks like to me, and we'll do a little, like I said, I just showed his podcast page there, but I think it might be better if I just look at it from my own feed, which is, I use, for those interested, I use overcast.fm. Okay. And with that, we'll take a look here at some of his episodes. Way back when. I want to play some of this early stuff too. Liberty Lockdown episode 1. Welcome back, slaves. He says. Okay, I don't know what that. Lockdown Charles Cummins. He's had pretty good guests on there as well. We've got Joshua Smith, Brad Palumbo, Pete Quinones, Free Men Beyond the Wall. Looks like the trend is just typical libertarian podcast issues, interviews with your typical guests, kind of the stuff that's happening in the day, and then kind of delves into the world. So I don't know what his background is. He said he worked in the mortgage industry for a while. His duration on those ones ranging from 25, 35 minutes. He's had some over 70. Looks like he started posting episodes in April of 2020. He has 45, 47 episodes every week or so. And the more anger he's kind of got, the more he seems to be just pushing things out, which is fantastic. His intro. Let's start with some of the breakdown here. So episode 1, I'll just start to play a little here, and we'll have a little, and we'll play it at normal speeds.
You know what time it is. It's time for QE8, QE10. Don't worry about it. Money printer go burr. Money printer go burr.
The good news is his quality is up since then. So we'll maybe go to a few other ones here. That's a bit rough for me on the open. The music was a little bit Night at the Roxbury. So, okay. Intro music, like I said, is a little bit off. He released up 16. He ended up releasing an episode that looks like he took into account, made his own intro. That's very, look, I only know maybe he and Bob Murphy that are making your own intro music as far as on the Liberty world. So that's pretty good. And let's take a look at, he changed the song a few times. So there was one right before that. You can go in and take a listen to what those are sounding like. No, it's the same exact song, but it sounds like it's been EQ'd and done a little bit production with it. Yeah, that's better.
To another episode of Liberty Lockdown. I have set up my studio to have another microphone so it doesn't sound like such garbaggio.
Okay, and it went straight. Look, so we'll talk about production value there. It looked like that was only in one ear, by the way. You can fix those things, but he had a little bit better on the music. But the intro, as you can tell, it went boom right into it. Didn't have any smooth undertone, maybe a little back, put the music behind. That would have maybe helped. But I will say, I'll give Clint some props because episode 16, between 16 and 17, he ends up throwing in his own Liberty Lockdown intro music. And I'm pretty sure he wrote this himself and performed it. Let's just take a listen.
Big shout out to everybody that's been with me since Jump Street.
See, Jump Street. I don't know. 21?
World premiere. Welcome to Liberty Lockdown. Please scan your barcode. Your liberty ain't gone, but yeah, it's on hold. Where did it come from and where did it go? It requires a fight, not tweeting from your phone. Don't need a king, get him off the fucking throne. If you're riding with the thought, you've always got a home. The virus you're scared of will come and it'll go. The government knows this, don't get treated like a hoe. Like Nico and Shane, you're probably wondering what's happening. Scared Hollywood left these lyrical fast.
I would suggest you take a listen because he references a bunch of other, Liberty podcasts and gives a little, kick on those ones. But I would say, so he uses that as the intro now, and it's been pretty steady all the way up through. But what kind of came on my radar, like I said, was this episode 26, 27, and conversing with a normie or so. So we'll get to that in here a little bit. Okay, talk about production. Self-production or if a company. It's hard to tell. I think it goes through SoundCloud, Podfeeder, or something like that. Sound quality, well, I'll tell you what, even the first ones were decent, but you can tell he has a mic. He does some sort of editing on these, so there is some pretty good EQ, a mixing in there of some sense, or at least, there's programs out there even for free, some open source stuff that you can make fairly good quality sound with. So even on episode 1, he had pretty good quality editing. He makes his own music, so he knows what he's doing. He's probably got a little bit of skills for that, at least. And look, for the most part, he just runs his mouth I'm not saying that in a bad way. There's really not much editing needed as far as that goes. But he does pretty good. Like I said, there could be some smoother transition on the intro. I haven't seen that he has any ads. Timeliness of his topics, he tends to get to those pretty good. He's always, ranting about the stuff of the day. You follow him on Twitter. He does as well. Outro, he really has no out music. So it's not a problem. I mean, hopefully you're still there by the end, but maybe give me a little something to listen to, maybe throw in some different music, maybe throw in your own. You can do the whole entire song at the end. I will tell you, when I'm listening to stuff, and sometimes people have a song and you just, maybe I'm working in the yard and I have the headphones on, or I'm out riding my bike and the song comes in. Sometimes it's, it just grabs you, and it's something you can have for a little bit of a duration there. It's not so bad. Tangibles, host ability to interview. Well, I've heard him with, some prominent people, Palumbo, Joshua Smith, as an example. He's done quite a few people. I'm just giving you a sense. And then Pete Quinones, I mean, I'm sure he was maybe a little nervous for that one and did great. So I think he does a pretty good job. He's able to riff back and forth and talk without a problem. He's got a good handle on economics and basics of property rights. So you'd expect from a typical, freedom-loving podcast host. Research and his host staff, it looks like he's an army of one, which I'd give him credit for. Ease of speaking, or is he reading a script? Well, it's hard to tell. It's just an audio only podcast. So, but he freewheels enough. And when he has guests on, he obviously knows what he's talking about, which you can tell he does pretty good. Overall impression, I enjoyed the podcast. And I've been doing a little research for this and trying to listen to more and more. I just kind of got caught up with it. I've enjoyed it. I feel like he's kind of your general, I mean, what does he have to offer over like a Dave Smith or Robbie Bernstein or some of these other people? I don't know. He's the guy in California. He likes volleyball, but he does speak well. And we're going to play some clips of kind of one of his conversations. And you can tell he hits the topics, at least for me, in kind of the ANCAP style of, he knows what he's talking about. And he does a fairly good job of doing that. Is it shareable with normies? For the most part, yes. There can be, he actually went off last episode. I think it was called WTF. I didn't even see it. It's out here now, but it said like maybe you took it off. Did you take it out? No, WTF. This is what's coming. And with that, he went to little WTF, as you might expect. And he also went a little to the point where I believe he said his mom had a little problem, or his grandma or something like that. WTF is happening. And he kind of went off on Trump and a few others. So he got emotional. He got into it. Conspiracy theory content, I haven't heard too much that he's going, off the rails on anything. And he seems to be just fine with just his content. It's your typical ANCAP, private property rights. So you may think that there's some things out there that are not so cogent, but I wouldn't say he's got any conspiracy theory stuff as of yet. Can you listen to it at 1.5 speed? Which is what I do. I listen to most of these podcasts at 1.5, sometimes not up to 2. Clint is no Ben Shapiro. When I say that, he doesn't speak so fast that you need to do. Try to listen to a Ben Shapiro podcast at 1.5. It's a little bit nerve-wracking. And content aside, I'm just saying the kid speaks quick. Clint does just fine, but so I can listen to him at 1.5, and I really don't have a problem with that. All right, let's talk about this episode 27 that kind of came on my radar. Like I said, I tweeted back and forth with him. He said, hey, this is going to change the world. This is going to convert millions. I don't know if he said that, because actually he took the tweet down. So I couldn't find the original one. He talks in episode 27, converting a non-believer. And he talks to a guy named Nathan. They did not go into his last name. 24-year-old, former military. Wanted to keep him anonymous. He's also a volleyball buddy of Clint, so I give him credit for that. Clinton brought him into the discussion and talked about anarcho-capitalism, libertarianism. Nathan considered himself a political virgin, it seems, but he was very aware of libertarian ideas and thoughts. And it seemed to me, I've had conversations with even libertarian-leaning Republicans, and it's gone sideways. So Clint was Nathan, this guy was very much open to a conversation. And then I give Clint a lot of credit for how he did. The conversation started with Nathan asking him some questions about libertarianism. I'm going to play actually some of those. He seemed to be very open-minded, which I think was the key to this conversation. So he may convert him, I believe, in the end to libertarianism, but this guy knew what he was talking about. He was very much open to the discussion. He did not really push, but he had some questions. But he didn't really push back with antagonism that you see all the time from the left and a lot of times from the right. He asked him, first of all, what does it mean to be a libertarian? And Clint comes out with the perfect answer about property rights. What point is force needed? Someone stepping in, and Clint comes out with some good answers there as well. So why don't we go to those clips and kind of give it a little breakdown and understanding of what this podcast is about. And maybe I should at least. Okay, here we go.
Right. So it's my first question is going to ultimately, I don't want a perspective of, like what is, being a libertarian mean for you or for other people, but it's just per definition, what does it mean to be a libertarian?
Oh man, I should have prepared better. What does it mean to be a libertarian? To me, it's all about property rights. And by that, I mean, yourself would be the foundation. So self-ownership is actually the foundational principle of libertarianism. So for me, that is the principle by which all other laws and all other principles are established. So I own my own body. That means that I can do what I want with it. So that means there's no drug laws. I can kill myself. I can do basically anything as long as I don't infringe on someone else's right to do what they want with their body. That's probably the most simplistic answer that I can give.
All right, yeah, it is very simplistic, and it's the right one. You go back. I've just recently been reading Murray Rothbard's Ethics of Liberty, and I mean everything breaks down to that. And I've had some conversations. I'm not going to say with who, but a right-leaning libertarian guy, right-wing Republican libertarian-leaning type, free market. And I did not start off with this answer. And you know what? That's the answer. I said I've been reading Murray Rothbard's Ethics of Liberty, and he breaks it down to the fundamental. If you start from this crumbling bottom here of describing how everything works and that your self-ownership, and then you move yourself up. Once you can't argue with the simple and the basic and how everything starts, and then you move on from there rather than trying to grab these. Hey, let's talk about the roads, to begin with. And then you go, well, I didn't even mention that, self-ownership is kind of the stem from all of which everything brings about that. That was perfect answer. Said he didn't study for that, but yet, boom, there he was. And he had the correct answer. Let's try the next one.
Okay. So, I mean, there is a line though, somewhere that's drawn in the sand. So what I'm understanding is it is heavily based off the individual, and it's their ability to choose their actions, to have not necessarily ultimate freedom, but it's a lot more freedom than what we're used to. But at what point, where is that line? Where do, let's say hypothetically, this is the direction that the country goes in. Let's say every single person becomes libertarian, and the entire country is on the same page. They all have these same views and ideals.
God willing.
At what point do you draw the line? At what point is it okay for someone else to step in and be like, hey, so I understand you talk about killing other people or things like that, but on the smaller day-to-day things, not quite such a big show of, or a big crime, but when it comes down to something small like petty theft or breaking and entering, or
all of that would fall under property rights. So basically the same.
And I just want to make a comment here. First of all, this guy Nathan, he's got good questions. I tend to believe that this was not staged, but the questions are well done, and they're done with thought, with an open mind, that you almost think that they're leading. Like, they sat down and you went over it with the witness before. Let's see what Clint has to say.
Is your body is your property. Like, there will be laws, whether you have it. So this is an important distinction to make. There are two different lines of thinking within libertarianism. There's the anarchist or the anarcho-capitalist, which is what we talked about yesterday. And then there's the libertarians. Libertarians tend to believe that there should be a government, but it should be as small as possible. They're also called minarchists, so it'd be a minimum anarchy, so a minimum government, but still anarchist based. So essentially, the libertarian belief is that the government should be as small as possible to defend people's property rights and, you know, their being, essentially, so their safety at the, you know, fundamental level. The anarchist principle would be more that it would all be dictated by local agreements. So instead of having the Bill of Rights on the national level and a federal government which handles law and legality and imprisonment and things like that, it would be dictated by, like, maybe the city of Carlsbad or the people of Carlsbad would come to an agreement on what laws apply here and what are the punishments if you break them.
All right. And once again, well done on the answers and no problems with that as well. Clint has, Nathan, I don't know, Nathan, whatever his name is. He does continue to ask some good questions. This one was about socialism in Ancapistan, so you might say, and let's see what he says there.
In fairness, we would never hope nor desire nor expect that everyone would be a libertarian within a libertarian society.
Of course.
You could have socialists within a libertarian society as long as they're doing it voluntarily. The basis of all of our concepts would be that everything is voluntary. So if you want to be in a commune where, like, you pool all your resources, you pool all your labor, everyone gets paid an equal share, you can do that. That's the beauty about the libertarian ideal, is that even though we believe in the individual, within our community, you can have commune type setups where socialists and communists can actually thrive and live and exist peacefully with us.
I actually totally agree, and that's something you can always argue with. It seems like it might also be the downfall of us libertarian and Ancapistan hopefuls in the future, where they keep getting these little communities together and they do their little socialism thing. Next thing you know, their disease spreads every which way, and next thing you know, it's you're in a situation that maybe you didn't want to be in to begin with. He also mentioned one other item here, and it's about free markets and how they resolve things.
Government monopolized would have free market competition. So instead of there being just one utility company I could use, I would have the option of paying for someone else to run utilities in my house and me using them, or I could go solar or whatever else, you know. Ultimately, there's no real answer to this question because we don't know what the free market actually looks like. We don't know what it provides. We don't know what it could provide if the shackles were removed from it. If the government stopped providing these services, we have no idea what innovation might exist. We might not be driving cars today if it weren't for the government that put in the interstate highways back in the 50s. Like, we may have evolved past vehicles in that regard if we didn't have government putting these flat spaces everywhere.
Which is a great comment, and that's one thing that I think Bob Murphy and some of these others that have talked about these kind of situations, law, government, how those would proceed going forward. The answer really is we don't know, and this is the way you talk to a free market person, right? We don't know. The free market has done such amazing things with phones and technology and changed stuff we never thought would possible, or you can't imagine. You know, it's always fun to look. I recently read Heinlein's Moon is a Harsh Mistress, which was written in the 1960s, is supposed to be in the future, about 2070. So obviously 2070 is still 50 years away. And this book was written in the 1960s. So what's the technological and the sci-fi, situation that he imagined would be for us another 50 years when we have phones and whatnot? It's actually pretty good. He's got ideas there where there's a computer that's evolved to the point where it has personality and it has, conversations, and it's like a actual person, which you can imagine would be the case. So we don't know what's going to go on. Clint obviously recognizes this, and I think that's the part that you answer, because so many people, when they say, "Oh, how are you going to build the roads, or how are you going to get this person to, come to court?" You know what? We're going to have a solution, because the government's not going to be there, and people are going to figure it out, and they're going to figure it out in a way that's going to be most beneficial. It's not always going to be easy. There's going to be rocky, situations coming here and there, but for the most part, I think it's going to be, you're going to make it. Okay, so I think that's kind of all we'll play for clips of the Liberty lockdown. Recently, like I said, he had Peter Quinones on there from the Free Man Beyond the Wall. It was a great podcast. Pete came in a little on the black-pilled side and was throwing daggers and he was a little, it's maybe one of those days. I also went back and listened to Max Justice one. That was pretty good. He's a filmmaker, libertarian. Josh Smith, you may not like him. He's at large for the Libertarian Party. Brad Palumbo was actually an interesting one I just listened to last night, because Brad, who works for a fee, I think he does something with NRO and some others. He has his own podcast. He's pretty much in this libertarian space. But he was also somewhat not quite familiar with, Dave Smith. I've heard of Dave Smith, which is kind of an interesting thing, but I thought it was a pretty good episode for what we had there. And, I haven't listened to them all, so I will try to get down and check out every single podcast I can actually do for that. One of the one I thought I would talk about was, there was a clip recently from Dave Smith where he was breaking down a Bill Maher issue. And I thought we'd go through that and I had a little counter on that one, but maybe we'll say that for next time, maybe a next time's episode. So my overall impression of the Liberty Lockdown podcast, I think it's good. I think it's worthwhile. He definitely knows his stuff. He knows his libertarian. He's kind of libertarian bona fides in that regard. I don't know what his education is on that. This is what I mentioned with, and I kind of mentioned that on my own to kind of devalue me, which is, I've got a decent education. I've, engineering, master's. We go through a law degree. I own my own, but there's some of these people that it doesn't matter. It kind of is, and this is the problem you have, I think, with some of the left libertarian thing, is they place so much, in the left and the right do this as well, place so much emphasis on your ivory tower intellectuals, and they will, science is everything type of thing. But it's something to listen to someone who, and I don't know, Clinton may have a doctorate in something. He's a pretty smart guy. And if he doesn't, it doesn't matter. And that's kind of my point. Dave Smith can, go toe to toe with a Swarrock, who is, by the way, got into it with him on Twitter the other day. He mentions, he tries to throw out a joke, and it's about Dr. Paul being deplatformed from Facebook. And so he, makes a funny joke about, it looks like some prominent person is still posting conspirioid, and stuff like this. And so I just went to Facebook and I got a picture of him. That his Facebook page is still up and, not deplatformed. And he made some comment, and you could think it's maybe Dr. Paul, maybe it's not. So I just went to his page and I saw his picture there, and I just took a snapshot and replied to it. And I said, confirmed, with Swarrock, his own family picture on there. And then he comes back, he goes, what on that page is actually conspiratorial? And I'm like, you made a joke. I made a joke. Now you're kind of trying to come back with nitpicky stuff. I'm not going to, and I just said, I don't know. I was really talking about your actual picture. It looked pretty funny to me. I think we'll just call it there for now. Check out Clint's podcast, the Liberty Lockdown Thought on, I'll put it in the show notes here on Twitter. Where you can check him out. And I don't think he has a Patreon, so maybe he needs to do some of those things. Get a Patreon group, Clint. Get I don't know. You're probably growing leaps and bounds over from what I have and what anybody else was doing. So I hope everyone enjoyed it. Give me some input on what you want to see for the Liberty Lockdown. That's his show, Liberty Podcast Review. My name is Tyler Yonke. Thank you, everyone, for joining us, and we will see you next time.